In this video, I'll be showing you guys how to add patrol points, and this was a recommendation. I forgot who exactly said it, but thank you for the recommendation. Anyways, this isn't really a hard to implement if you followed my tutorial on the enemies, so it should be pretty simple. So I have this new enemy I created called a bombshell, and if you're not within this certain area 3D, he's gonna continue to his patrol points and he's gonna go to these 3 green dots. So he's gonna go to whatever one is first. So you go over here, and once he reaches this target, he'll go to the next one, and then he'll loop around to this one. So that's his idle, I guess, animation. Not really, but close enough. Okay, anyways, so the first thing you want to do is you want to create a new component, and I call this player detection area 3D. And once you create this, you can do that by doing area 3D, right clicking it, save branch as scene, and then you want to open up the scene, right click, add script, open the script. You want to copy this down. So this is going to be the main importance of this entire script is managing this variable and the entity state. So we're going to connect two signals, and it's going to be body entered and body exit, unless your game uses area 3Ds instead of bodies. And you're gonna copy down this, so you have to make sure your player is within a group called player, or whatever you want to call it. And all this does is, on ready, it checks if there's any overlapping bodies, and if there is, then player detected equals true. And you might be wondering why we have this if we have these two signals, but when you spawn in the area 3D or the enemy, sometimes it doesn't detect the body entering because it didn't enter, it was already in there to begin with. So which is why we have to see if there's any overlapping bodies. And if the body is in group player, which only the player should be in, then player detected equals true. And we should probably do manager dot entities date, I can't spell, equals 1. And 1 is chase, like the state manager chase, and that means the enemy will start chasing the player, obviously. And anyways, these two signals basically do the same thing, except when the player leaves the area 3D, player detected is equal to false, and this is when the enemy enters its idle state. So then it will go to these patrol points, these 3 green dots, and these 3 green dots are just visual representations, and that should be it. And also make sure you include the export variable for manager, that way you could actually change its entity state. Okay, so let's go back here. Okay, so everything should be the same as a normal enemy except for these few changes. So you want to add the new component, you want to add a collision shape to it. It should be fairly big, and also make sure to change your collision layers. Okay, so now the first change is we're going to look over in enemy manager. So some of these things you see are a little bit different, but those are just tweaks from my point of view, and you do not need all of these if it looks different from your script. Okay, so the two things you need: idle p array, or actually three. These two variables, or these three variables, sorry, and this is just the node of the area 3D. Over here, this is going to store all your positions that you want your enemy to patrol. And then idle position target is going to be a placeholder, basically. It's just going to store what position or target position the enemy is currently going towards. Okay, so other than that, you also need an export variable has idle, and this is just a boolean, and it's going to be set to false, which you'd obviously have to change if you want this to work. So you just click over here on enemy manager and check mark the has idle, and that's just included in case you don't want enemies with idle points. Okay, and then you want to create a function ready script, or a function, and you want to do if has idle equals true, idle position target equals the first point in your idle position array. And I forgot to mention, so when you click on enemy manager, you want to press add element and fill out your points where you want your enemy to patrol, and make sure the Y values are somewhat relevant to your actual map. So if I had like a big hill, right? Pretend this wall is like a hill. I wouldn't set the Y value of that point to 0, because then the enemy won't ever actually get to the point. So I would do like pretend the Y value at the top of the mountain is 70. I'd make sure the point is 70, like the Y value is 70. That way the code won't work if it is not like that. Okay, so you just gotta fill out your points. I have 3. You can add more, you can add as many as you want. And yeah. Okay, so we're gonna go over everything else. Okay, so in the physics process function, right above match entity state, you want to have this line of code. So if we have an idle feature, we're gonna check if the player detector is equal to false, and this isn't, I don't know, this is kind of like a backup if something goes wrong. I don't know. You don't really need that, I guess, but I'm just including it in case something goes wrong. And I'm just making sure that should be, oh actually no, there's this function that you need to include, and this will handle basically what our next point will be after we reach our first target. And to put it simply, we're just checking if the enemy actually has an idle feature. Then we're getting the index within the idle p array. So once you first call this function, you'll obviously be at 0, like your index would be 0. And that's what this line of code does, is it basically just gets what index you're currently on, and you create a new variable called next so that it's global throughout this if statement, or the function I should say, the rest of the function at least. And over here you're checking if you're within the array's size, because if I just reached the last point and I added +1, there's obviously no index with 3, so I would have to reset the index to 0 and I'd loop around basically. And if you're not at that point, so if you're at like the first index, you just add a 1 and you'd get index 2. So you'd get to the second point. And then you're going to set idle position target equal to next, which is what you defined. And that should be it on the enemy manager. Now the hard part, or slightly hard part, is navigation agent. Okay, so over here we have our reach target. We've had it in the previous code, I believe. Anyways, you're gonna create a set function, and this is, you can do this with any variable if you feel like it. So it's basically whenever this variable is changed, or changed or set, basically, it will trigger this function. And to do this, you just add a colon at the end of equals true, and then you indent, and then you do set parentheses. In the parameters, there must be something in the parameters. I just called it v for value, and I set reach target to that value, and I'm checking if reach target equals true and the enemy is has an idle feature. Then we're going to request the next position that we must go to. So basically, when the enemy reaches its first point in the patrol point array, it's going to ask for the next point. And it'll all make sense in a bit, trust me. Okay, so alright, this is the majority of it. Is all you gotta do is if manager.idle position target equals true, just ignore this. This was a test. And if we are idle, if the enemy is idle and not chasing anyone, then we're gonna set the target position equal to manager.idle position target, which is what we would have set when this is called. Okay, so then a few changes to be made. It won't, since you add this new idle position target, you're gonna have to modify everything else. If you have enemies that don't have idle features, and I just do this just in case, even if every enemy is gonna have an idle feature. So if manager.entityState is not 0, so if it isn't idle, or if manager.hasIdle equals false, so basically it's not idle. You can ignore these two lines, and if main.player, so you're just checking if the player exists, then the target position equals the player's position. And this was there in the previous code, so nothing too new. And then the other small changes are you simply just want to do if manager.entityState does not equal 0, or I should say idle, then you're gonna change the entity state to chase. But essentially how this works, I'll give you a quick rundown. The target position is set to the patrol point, a certain patrol point. Once the enemy is close enough to that patrol point, reach target will be set to true, right? And when that's set to true, we're gonna request the next position, and then it's gonna go on loop basically. So you could imagine if we started chasing the target, if we set our entity state to chase when we're not close enough to patrol point, we wouldn't be actually idle, or the enemy wouldn't be idle. So that's why we had to include this line. And I don't think this matters. Like attack states, it won't. You could include this line if you want. Basically, it won't. The enemy will not attack, regardless if you're if it's in entity state attack, because there's no player within its hurt box, so it does not matter. And that should be it. If I forgot something, I don't think I have. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, I can't think of anything else I'm missing. Okay, so let me just go over before I show you like a test. Let me just go over some errors that could happen. So the first error is, of course, your navigation region. So no matter what, you should have a navigation region. That way the enemies could actually move. But pretend your navigation region is like screwed up. This is what actually happened to me when I was testing this or creating it. It wouldn't work because my navigation region was a little messed up because of my mesh. Because I had a different mesh like this. You can see, let me just raise it up. And there was a certain spot, I don't know exactly where it is, but there's a spot that you just couldn't walk over. And then also, if you notice down here, the enemies would pathfind underneath the map. So that's why it's important to have a plane as your mesh. So if you're in Blender, use a plane to create your map. It's just better. There's less chance of errors. Of course, I don't know exactly what I did wrong to produce that result, but I think it's just better to be on the safe side. Anyways, your navigation layer should be the same as your enemy's navigation layer. And finally, if your navigation agent is too tall, this won't work. So you gotta raise your navigation region like a tiny bit. As you can see, I raised mine by 0.92, and originally this ball guy was not moving, so I just went through some trial and error and figured it out. And that should be it. Okay, let's test it out. Okay, so you see the ball's chasing me right now. I'm gonna dash away, and the ball continues to its idle points. And the little red enemy does not have idle points, so it's still chasing me. Yeah, I added like a new sword within my game. I need to polish it up, especially the knockback, but still, it's going good. And I created a tutorial on the character body 3D if you want to see how to jump and dash. So that's pretty useful. And you can see that this guy is looping constantly. And of course, you can put these points wherever you like, as long as it's possible to get to them. So this will not work if a point is like 500 meters up in the sky and there's no way to get to there. And I'll show you, it's gonna chase me if I get too close in its area 3D, and it will go back to its position. if I'm not, and I believe it does resume to its last position. So if I go in, it'll chase me. If I go out, it'll go back to the second position because that's the one it was currently on or recently on. So yeah, that's it for the tutorial. That was my grenade or shockwave, but yeah, thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this tutorial, please like, subscribe, and if you want any help or other tutorials, please leave it down in the comments. I'm more than happy to create other tutorials. Anyways, thanks for watching.